Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are going to study Ezra chapter 10 and hopefully complete the chapter. So this is part B. We had just learned in the first half of chapter 10 that Shechaniah, one of the leaders of the people, approached Ezra, told him there is hope, we can do this, we can reestablish our covenant with God. We can divorce ourselves from those women whom we brought into our homes, whom have remained attached to idol worship. And we can do this. And we're going to learn now, today, in this part, a little bit more of the details of Shechaniah's plan. But the plan began first by saying, Ezra, you're the leader, get up, we need you to lead. And Ezra responded, he got up, he called all of the leadership and said, we need to gather all of the Jewish people, everyone, to Jerusalem. You have 3 days to come. So, verse 9, which is where we're up to, Vayikavtzu kol anshe Yehuda Binyamin Yerushalayim. All of the people of Judah and Benjamin then gathered themselves to Jerusalem, l'shloshes hayamim, within that 3-day window, hu chodesh hatshii. This took place in the 9th month, which is the month of Kislev, be'esrim b'chodesh, on the 20th day of the month. This happened very, very close to Hanukkah. This is during the rainy season, the winter time. Vayeshvu kol ha'am b'rchov beis Elohim, and the people stood in the street in front of the house of God. Mar'idim al hadavar u'mehagshamim, and they were scared and afraid regarding this issue, and they are also uncomfortable because of heavy rains. So they're in the middle of rainstorms. All the people gather during a stormy time, and they're trembling. And remember, I pointed out, and I brought proof from Malachi. We spoke about this in the last 2 podcasts, that the people were trembling, number one, because they realized that this is a big problem, and Ezra had focused and told them about how serious this issue is and how this can bring us back to the destruction again. Just like it led to the destruction of the first temple, it can lead again to the same thing. And they were also shaking because of the impact this is going to have. These are women who they were in love with, women that they had loved with, built relationships with, raised families with, and they're now being asked to break this up. So and they're waiting to see what is the solution going to be. Vayakam Ezra HaKohen, so Ezra the priest stood up, Vayomer Lehem, and he said, Atem altem, you are the ones who have rebelled. You, all of you. Vatoshivu, again, look at that language, Vatoshivu, and you have settled within your families, Nashim Nachrios, foreign women. Now, if you remember, what happened when Rus, and I drew some parallels in our last podcast between the story of Ruth, who was a convert, who was brought in and welcomed with open arms, at least by Boaz, and eventually into the Jewish people, and these women. Ruth said, V'anochi nachriya, I am a foreigner, but Boaz said, no, you are not. Because why? Because you were Ozev, you left your family, you left your ways behind, you left the ways of that nation that you were a part of behind. But you, Ezra now says, are doing differently. Vatoshivu, you have settled within your homes. So remember, Rus was shav, she was shovna, she was shav, she settled into the Jewish people. But over here, Ezra is saying, you have settled into the Jewish people, nashim nachrios, women who actually still are nachrios, who are still foreigners. They have maintained those ways. They weren't, as Ezra had said in chapter 6, they weren't from those that were vayibadlu, that had separated themselves, but they stayed nachrios, the hosif al asmas Yisrael, to add more sins to the sins of the people of Israel, as if we haven't done enough wrong, you've now done this. V'ata, and now, tenu toda al Adonai Eloi Avosecha, I want you to give thanks to God. This is fascinating. Give thanks to God, mean show appreciation for the fact that God has brought you back. Don't go. The biggest appreciation a people can show is that we've changed. If you truly appreciate what somebody does for you, then you show that you're willing to change. And Ezra in the last chapter 9 had emphasized so much, they haven't changed. They haven't done anything different. They're going back to the same ways. So Ezra is saying, give thanks and change. Va'asu ritzono, do what he wants. And the key word, vihi bodlu, and separate yourselves, me'amei haaretz. Separate yourselves from the people of the land. How do you say? And he's not just speaking to the people, to the Judeans, he's speaking to those wives. He's asking them, you be part of those that are nivdelu, that separate yourselves from the Amei Haaretz. Remember, in chapter 6, there were those of the Amei Haaretz that were Hibadlu, that did separate themselves, and they were welcomed. Here Ezra is beseeching those people, all of those families, all those men, women, and children, which we emphasized several verses ago, were gathered here together. Hibadlu, separate yourselves. Umin hanoshim hanochrios. And then you, all of you men, separate yourselves from those women who remain nachrios, who remain strangers, and do not separate themselves from the Amei Haaretz. Vayanu chol hakol, and all of the people answered, Vayomru kol gadol, and they said in a loud voice together, Cain. When did we also have all the people answering together? It was at Har Sinai. It was at the Mount Sinai, which, remember, Shechaniah was hinted to when he said, we are going to enter a new bris, not a new bris, he didn't use the word new, he said, we are going to enter a covenant with God. So Vayomru Kol Gadol, the people said, Cain, yes, Kidvarcha Aleinu Lasos, we are definitely going to do exactly. It is our responsibility to do. They accepted responsibility. Aleinu, it is our responsibility to do exactly as you say, and separate ourselves from the Amei Haaretz. And if our women do not want to separate themselves from the Amei Haaretz, then they are Nashim Hanochrios, they are foreign women, and we should separate ourselves from them. Avol, however, the people, Ha'am Rav, there's many people here. The people are still talking. It's difficult for us to stand out here. It's a rainy time. We can't do all this. We don't want to stand out here in the outside in the rain. And this job, this what you're asking us to do, which is to take all, go through each and every one of these women and decide who is willing to be Lidros Es Hashem, to search out God and rejoin the Jewish people, and who is not. This work, Lo liyom echad v'lo lishnayim, this cannot be done in just a day or two. Ki hirbinu lifshoah badavar hazeh, because we have been very negligent in this issue. Yamdu nosarenu, please let us establish and have our leadership stand up, have our leadership appoint l'chol hakol over the whole nation, v'chol asher ba'areinu, and all of those that are living in our cities, because we do want to go home, of course. We don't want to stand out here in the rain. Hahoshiv nashim nachrios, all of those people in our city who have been hoshiv, that have settled within their homes, brought and welcomed into their homes foreign women, yavoli itim zubanim. Let each one come, let he, in the singular language, let he come. So in other words, let our leadership stand up, right? So that each and every person can come li'itim zubanim at specific times. V'imahem, and together with them shall come ziknei ir va'ir, the elders of each and every city, v'shofteha, and her judges. Let them, so that each and every one can come. What is the point of setting up a Beit Din, setting up a separate panel in each and every city to review each and every case? Everyone knows where the women came from. The point here is clearly obvious that it is doing that each and every one of these panels is now talking to these women and saying, are you a Nashim Nachriya? Are you going to remain in the ways of your ancestors, where you come from, or are you ready to come and join the Jewish people and convert? So this is how the people are now going to solve this problem. Those of you who are willing to join the Jewish people, those families will not be broken. Those are the ones that Malachi, Ezra himself said, Sonei Shalach, God does not want to separate you. God does not want to separate you from the woman that you love, the one Eshes Nu'urecha, like we saw in Malachi when Ezra said it there. but those of you that are still Nashim Nachrios, that have been brought into Jewish families, will be gone. Ad lo hashiv charonaf Eloheinu, until we can turn away the anger of our God, mimenu, from us, ad la davar hazeh, until regarding this issue, until this thing is finally solved, this problem is solved. Ach Yonasan ben Asoel, however, there was opposition to this plan. Yonasan ben Asoel v'Yachazia ben Tikva amdu al zos. They stood against this. Umishulam v'Shabtai Halevi, and another person named Mishulam and Shabtai, who were Levites, Azarum, helped them. Now the question is, some understood. There's many ways to read this pasuk, and it's hard to know. But Rashi and others understand Amdu al Zos, that Yonasan and Yachzia opposed the plan, and whereas Meshulam and Shabsai helped them. The question is, did that mean that Meshulam and Shabsai helped the people that were implementing the plan, or helped those that opposed the plan? It's hard to read it. Some learn Yonasan ben Asoel and Yechazia ben Tikva, and the Metzudos learns it this way. Amdu al Zos, meaning that they stood upon this, meaning they stood up to help implement the plan. So it's hard to know whether these were who's the good guys, who's the bad guys here. There's various ways of reading these verses. So I just showed you the different possibilities. So Vayasuchein, but now let's get back to the people. The Bnei Agola, the people, the returnees from the exile, did as they had promised. Vayibadlu, Ezra HaKohen Anashim Rasheha Avos Leves Avosam B'chulam B'Shemos, and Ezra separated from the crowd the leadership, and he called them out by names. The head of this family, that of that family. Vayeshvu b'yom echad lachodesh asiri l'dayosh hadavar, and they sat down on the first day of the 10th month. So remember, there was the 20th day of the 9th month. So this would be actually in the middle of the festival of Hanukkah. The festival of Hanukkah had, of course, not yet been established yet, but it's when one day would become the festival of Hanukkah, on the first day of the 10th month of Tevet, to search out this issue. And in other words, again, because what's the depth of this searching? The depth of the searching, I have been explaining, is searching each and every case to determine which of these foreign women, and I put foreign in quotes, foreign women, are ready to join the Jewish people, and which are not going to, and therefore need to be divorced. Vayechalu v'kol, and then they were done with them all. Hahoshiv anashim, all of the men, hahoshivu nashim nachrios, that had settled, again, this language hoshivu, and again reminding us of the language used by Ruth. Those that had been hoshivu nashim nachrios, women that were nachrios, unlike Ruth, who was explicitly told by Boaz, you are not a nachriah. Ad yom echad lachodesh harishon, they were done with all of this by the first day of the first month. So it took, in other words, the entire month of from the 20th day of Kislev, so the last 9 or 10 days of the month of Kislev, Teves and Shvat and Adar. So it took an entire 3 whole months. They set up these panels in the beginning of Teves. It took the month of Teves, the month of Shvat, the month of Adar, and by the time you get to the first of Nisan, they had finally went through all the families. Now I want to remind you, before we do read the last few verses of the book of Ezra, the population, based on the numbers that we had seen in the book of Ezra so far, the numbers of the people that had returned in the first wave, and the number of people that came with Ezra in the second wave of return, and adding for some population growth, we would have to estimate that the population was approximately 65 or 70,000 people or so. And then, of course, if you mix in people from the land that had been there, people that had rejoined, some stragglers from the 10 other 10 tribes, some people from the land, and so on, there could have been more. But it's assuming it was somewhere around 65, 70,000 people. So I don't know exactly how many families that would translate into, assuming, this is a very rough calculation, of about half, about 35,000 were men. Some were, but then out of those 35,000, we're looking at, a significant number of children or elderly people that were not married. So let's assume, I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume we're looking at somewhere between, about 10 to 15,000 family units, relationship units. So among those, how many people were found that had to divorce their wives? So let's read verse 18. Vayimotzei mibnei haKohanim, of the Kohanim, of the priestly class, asher oshivu nachrios, the ones who had settled into their families foreign women who were nachrios, who remained nachrios, right? In other words, and they needed to be divorced. Mibnei Yoshua ben Yotzadak, from the family of Yoshua ben Yotzadak, the leader, the very righteous Yoshua, the one who came back with Zerubbabel, who is the high priest at the start of the Second Temple, who we've known and has been referred to as a very righteous man. But from his children, V'achav and his brothers, they had descendants, Maaseya, Eliezer, V'Yariv, Gedalia. Interestingly, the name Eliezer is still being used by the priests. It was a family name, from the great uncle, the Elazar of who was the son of Aaron, the high priest. So vayitnu yadam lo tzine shehem va'ashemim el tzon al ashmasam, and they gave their word. They promised that they would divorce their wives, the ones who were nachrios, and they brought a el tzon, a ram, as a sacrifice for their sin. Now this asham as a ram for this particular sin, most of the commentaries mention is not. It seems to be what's called a horat shah. This is a unique. It's not one of the standard carbonot sacrifices that are brought for this particular sin. But in this time, this is what they decided to do, even though that's not the official way it's done. It was something that was just declared for that moment, appropriate for that moment. It's interesting that, and we're going to have a pretty exhaustive list of each and every one that was determined. It took 3 months. Now, out of the thousands upon thousands of families, and it seemed like, remember, all of the people were crying about their sin. Most of the women, apparently, did convert by these batei din that had been established, and did separate themselves me'amei haaretz. It was a tiny number who remained rebellious and needed to be divorced, and we're going to list them all now. Bnei Imer, Chanani, Uzavadia, from the children of Imer. Chanani and Zavadia had wives that needed to be divorced. Bnei Chorim, Maaseya, Ve'elio, Shemaiah, Ve'echia, Ve'uzziah. So that's 5 people by those names had to divorce their wives. Bnei Pashchor, from the family of Pashchor. El Yoenai, Maaseya, Yishmael, Nitanel, Yozavad, Ve'el Asa. That is 6 people that had to. Min Halavim, Yozavad, V'Shemi, V'Kelaya. From the Levites, the following people were found that needed to divorce their wives: Yozavad and Shemi and Kelaya, who also had a name, Hukalita. Pasachia, Yehuda, Eliezer also needed to be divorced. Min HaMishorim, from the Levites who were singers, El Yashiv. Then the man named El Yashiv. Min HaShoarim, from those that were gatekeepers, Shalom, Voterem, Vu'uri. Those 3 people. Umi Israel. So that covers the priests and the Levites. Umi Israel, and from the Israelites, Parosh, from the family of Parosh, were the following people: Ramya, V'Yiziyah, Umalkiyah, Umiyamin, V'Elazar, Umalkiyah, Uvanoya. That's a list of 7 people. Bnei Elam, Matanya, Zechariah, V'Yechiel, V'Avdi, V'Remos, V'Eliah. That's another 6 people. Bnei Zatu, from the family of Zatu. El Yoenai, El Yashiv, Matanya, V'Remos, V'Zavad, V'Aziza. Ubnei Bevai, from the family of Bevai. Yehochanan, Chananya, Zabai, Atla. Another 4 people. Ubnei Bani, from the children of Bani. Meshulam, Malach, V'Adoya, Yashuvu, Sha'ol, B'Ramos. Umrei Pachas, from the family of Pachas, is Moav, Adna, Uchalol, Benoya, Maaseya, Matanya, Betzalel, Uvinu, Menashe. Umrei Chorim, from the children of Chorim, Eliezer, Yeshia, Malkiah, Shemaiah, Shimon. Binyamin from also from the same family. Another 3 people: Binyamin, Maluch, Shemariah. Bnei Choshum from the family of Choshum: Matnai, Matata, Zovod, Eliphelet, Yeremai, Menashe, Shimi. Bnei Bani is Ma'adai, Amram, V'uel. Benoya, Vedya, Kaluhu. Vanya, Meremos, El Yoshev. Matanya, Matnai, Vyasai. Uvani, Uvinui, Shimi. V'Shelemia, V'Nosan, V'Adoya. Machnadidavai, Shoshai, Shoroi. Azar El, V'Shelem, Yo, Shemaria. Shalom, Amaria, Yosef. I'm sorry, I'm just reading through all this. Umnei Nevo, from the children of Nevo: Yeiel, Matisya, Zovod, Zevina, Yadai, V'Yoel, Benoya. Which is the reason why it's important to read these names is not so much to remember or memorize each and every single name, but it's being extremely particular in mentioning these because these were the only ones. If you add them up, it adds up to about 113 people. So out of the thousands upon thousands of families, there was only 113 who had to divorce their wives because they remained nachrios. The rest of those that had taken foreign wives were vayibadlu. They joined that group of people who separated themselves, me'amei haaretz, joined the people of God and converted to Judaism, and raised families in the new land of Israel. Kol eila, but all of these that we listed, this is the final verse in Ezra, nasu nashim nachrios. These are the ones who had married, again emphasizing women who had remained nachrios. V'yesh mehem nashim, and among those there were some, vayasimu banim, there were women that actually had children that also needed to leave. So in other words, in the end of the story, the people were able to do it, just like Shechaniah had said to Ezra, we can do this. We're going to set up these courts. We'll go through each and every family, and we'll find the ones that are the women that are not willing to convert, and we will send them out. It can be done. And they only identified a relatively tiny number of families that had to happen, and among those families, it was a very traumatic event. But these were women, remember, who were given the opportunity to join the people of God, but chose not to, and chose they would rather go back to their families and go back to their idolatrous ways than join the Jewish people. This thus completes the book of Ezra. Looking forward to studying the book of Nehemiah together with you, which will start next. The book of Nehemiah continues in this similar time period, same time period of history. And many times in our history, Ezra and Nehemiah were both considered one book together. Our tradition now has them separated as Ezra and Nehemiah, but it'll continue, and we'll discuss some of the same issues that we've discussed in Ezra, that we discussed in Malachi. They'll come up again in the book of Nehemiah. Have a wonderful day.